Welcome back to another Transparency Tuesday, our first of 2024. For those of you that don't know, this is our sort of semi-regular chance to answer any questions that come in. They might be about yarn, about spinning, fibre, just about anything. As always, if you're watching live, feel free to drop any questions in the box below. We've had a few in ahead of time, which I'm going to get to. And if you're watching this after, please put them in the comments and we'll get to them next time. I'm in a slightly different spot this week to usual. Normally I'm upstairs, but I'm the only one in today, so I thought I could come down here, have a slightly different backdrop. Got some machinery in the background, which is quite fitting given some of the questions that we've had have been very sort of mill-centric and those sorts of questions. So I'm gonna dive straight in. First one came in. You mentioned putting fibre through a gill box. I visited a few mills and never come across one of these. Is it unusual? So the machine behind me here, Fish, is our gill box. He's a 1970s NSC GN5, to give him sort of his proper title. It's an intersecting gill box, to be technical about it. I actually checked, the person that asked this question is from the States. So over in North America, they tend to be called pin drafters rather than gill boxes, which arguably makes a lot more sense as a name. I'm not quite sure. I couldn't find out where the name gill box actually comes from, but it does the exact same job as a pin drafter. So broadly speaking, it's got three main jobs that it's doing. It's to do with fibre preparation. So you can see that there's fibre being fed in at the back there, and after gilling, it comes out and gets put into this can here. And so the three jobs that it's doing, first of all, are doubling. So what that means is feeding multiple slivers in. So in this case, I think we've got 14 being fed in, and it comes out as one. So what that means is you're making it more even. You're kind of taking the average every time that you do that. So in the preparation of a worsted spun yarn, the fibre might go through a gill box 6 or 7 times, depends slightly. And each time there, you're doubling it. Not confusingly, doubling doesn't necessarily mean with 2. Doubling just means combining multiple slivers together to get the average. So every time you do that, it's becoming more and more even, more and more regular. You're getting rid of any potential faults that have been introduced earlier in processing. So it's a really important step in making the best possible quality yarn. As I mentioned, for this particular pass through the gill box, we've got 14 ends going in and 1 coming out. Usually we'll have about 8 ends going in, 1 out. So each time that happens, it's making it 8 times more even, more regular. So you can imagine that after a few passes through, it's a lot more even. The next job that it does is very related to this. It's called drafting. So that's where drafting, in pin drafter, the American name for it, comes from. And what that means is we've got 14 ends going in, but we don't want a sliver that's 14 times the thickness coming out. So what we've got to do is draft it so that what's coming out is thinner than the sum of those of the sliver that's going in. And it's quite a simple process to do this. There are 2 sets of rollers, and the rollers on the outfeed actually go faster than the rollers on the infeed. So you're drafting out, if any of you have done any hand spinning, it's that exact process of just teasing it out to become thinner. I've got some sliver just here. So you start with something quite thick, and it is just drafting it out to make it thinner and to make more meters. So that's its second job, as I mentioned, pin drafter. That's where that comes from. And the third and probably most vital job that the gill box or pin drafter is doing is where the pin comes from in pin drafting. And what it does is it pulls the fibre through a series of thousands of tiny pins. I've got just one strip of the pins here. Hopefully that'll focus so you can see them. And there's a set of 72 of these. These are Fowler bars. And what it's doing is exactly like when you're combing your hair. It's just pulling it through there and it is untangling it. Any sort of hooks or tangles in the fibre are being kind of gently removed. And that is the main purpose of what we're doing here. So you want the fibre that's coming out to be a lot smoother and more aligned than the fibre going in. So at the moment we're on the first gill box pass, so the fibre that's going in has come out of the carder. So it's very tangled up and jumbled. What's coming out is going to be slightly smoother. It'll go for 3 passes through the gill box, first of all. Then it will pass through the comb. So I've got a comb, you can't quite see it, just off to my side, which I'll get into because I think there was a question about combing coming up. Then it'll go for another 3 or 4 passes through the gill box. So after all of these passes, you end up with a very, very smooth, very aligned, very lustrous fibre. And that's one of the kind of key characteristics of a worsted spun yarn, is that it's a lot smoother, a lot more aligned, a lot more lustrous. So I've got a bit of an example. So this is fibre that is off the carder. Hopefully that this kind of focuses well enough that you can see the difference. So the fibre off the carder is very, very jumbled, very kind of woolly. All the fibres are very entangled. There's not a lot of strength to it. So if I kind of pinch it, it pulls apart with absolutely no effort because of those jumbled up fibres. And what I'll show you is the difference. This is after a few passes through the gill box. I've absolutely no idea whether this will show up well enough for you. But what we've got with the gilled sliver is that all of these fibres are nicely aligned now. So it feels a lot more smooth. It's a lot more lustrous, and it's also a lot stronger because those fibres are aligned. It's got a lot more tensile strength. So this is almost ready for spinning. It's just a sample that I've pulled off of a different batch. So hopefully that gives kind of gilling, pin drafting, whatever you want to call it, 101, and why we do it. Next question that came in was actually a question that came in as a comment on a blog post that I put up over the weekend, the first in a series kind of talking about starting a mill. The first one was called Why Are We Doing It?, which is the biggest question of all. But the comment came in saying, thank you for sharing your journey and do let us know how we can help and support your project. Would you be offering shares? It's something we get asked quite often, not specifically about shares, but how people can support it. At the moment, we don't really have anything specific set up. We're really touched by all the people that want to buy in, invest in what we're doing, support it. The best way at the moment is to buy yarn, but we are always thinking about ways that we can offer that for people who don't need yarn, don't want any yarn, anything like that. So yeah, thank you very much for the question, but nothing more definitive just yet. The next question that came in was from Helena, who's one of the co-owners down at John Arbon Textiles. For those of you who maybe don't know, the comb that is just to my left and Chapman Arcada both came from the mill down in Devon. So Helena asks, how's Clint, the comb? Jack misses him. So I was letting Helena know that Clint is very good. I can probably turn you around, might be a bit of a mess. But this here is Clint, the comb. He is threaded up to do a bit of combing at the moment. And I think, yeah, I might go into a little bit about what a comb does. But we do have another question coming up, so I'll leave that until the end. Yeah, Clint is great. We had a bit of a falling out yesterday. He had a breakdown, which was entirely my fault. So he spent the entirety of yesterday all in hundreds of pieces. But we got him rebuilt this morning. And yeah, he is back to... We get on along again now, after a bit of falling out yesterday. Next question that came in was quite a big one. Where do you see the mill and business being in 5 years' time? I kind of know in a way, quietly in my head, but realistically, I have no idea. 5 years ago, we didn't think that we would be where we are now. So it's been a bit of a journey. And yeah, we'll see. We'll definitely still be making yarn, hopefully more of it. But yeah, we'll be here in our little corner of West Wales, trying to make beautiful things. That's the plan anyway. Next question that came in. I loved the blog post at the weekend and reading a bit about the decision of how the mill came about. I don't know if you'll answer this one in one of the next blogs, but how did you start in making yarn personally? I wasn't specifically planning on kind of mentioning this in any of the blogs, but I came into this sort of entirely by accident. A brief history is that my mum, Sally, started the company 25 years ago this year. We're going to be celebrating a big birthday. I had no intention of taking over the business, joining it in any way. So we're now co-owners, both directors, and the way that came about, as I say, was just entirely by accident. I was a freelance graphic designer, moved back to the farm to save on rent whilst I got any clients, and the deal was that I would design some labels, I think, and then when the labels were done, I designed a new website, and then it was just one thing after the other, and before I knew it, kind of became co-owner with Sally, who you don't see as much on Instagram, but is also in every day. She's not in today, she's working from home today. So even though you see me a lot more, there's the two of us, and our tiny little team, kind of behind what's happening here. But yeah, we'll go into the full story a little bit more in depth on a blog post probably coming out towards the end of this week. So keep an eye out for that in the kind of big story. Next question that came in was, a friend sent me your page and I love what you're doing. You may have already covered this, but is your mill a mini mill? We have one in my state over here and I love their yarn. So for anyone who knows mini mills and small mills in general, seeing this machine behind me will answer that no, we're not a mini mill. Mini mills are a kind of specific subset, generally spinning semi-worsted or a version of semi-worsted yarn, very small scale production, and they kind of fill a niche of single fleece production upwards. There are some fantastic little mini mills, a handful in the UK, quite a lot more over in the States. But we decided quite early on that it wasn't the right fit for what we want to achieve. Firstly, on the worsted spinning side of things, we wanted to be able to spin full worsted, and that's not really possible with a mini mill setup. And also capacity. We wanted to part of the mission of what we want to do here is make kind of a noticeable difference scale-wise to the UK and specifically the Welsh wool industry, and a mini mill just wouldn't really let us fill that part of the mission. It's something we do get asked quite a little bit. Why didn't we just get that? So yeah, as I say, there were just quite a few reasons why a mini mill didn't really suit our ambitions and what we wanted to achieve. So we've gone slightly bigger. I mean, we're a long way off being a big mill here, a long way off seeing some of the mills that we see. But we're carving out our little slice of spinning over here in West Wales. And something that I'm always reminded to shout about a bit more is that we're actually the first ever worsted spinning mill in Wales. So I'll try and be better about shouting about that, because it's quite an achievement that we're really proud of. So yeah, that gives a little bit of insight into why we're not a mini mill and why that wasn't the right thing for us. The final question that came in ahead of time was, I've always wondered what's the difference between semi-worsted and worsted, quite fitting given the previous question, and is American worsted yarn different? So American worsted yarn, I think what is being referred to here, worsted is also a weight in hand knitting, mostly used over in the States. It's kind of a light Aran to us Brits. And that is different. That doesn't necessarily have to be worsted spun. There's a bit of confusion that sometimes comes in there. But worsted spinning and worsted weight are kind of unrelated. I don't quite know where the naming comes from specifically and why they're linked, but yeah, they're not the same thing. So the difference between semi-worsted and fully worsted is the combing process. So in a semi-worsted yarn, kind of a true semi-worsted, will be carded pretty much the same. It will then go onto a gill box, like what I've got behind me. Usually kind of 3 passes through the gill box, which is that aligning process I was talking about earlier. So it's aligning those fibres, doing the doubling to get a more even sliver, and then it's spun straight after that. With a fully worsted yarn, the main difference is that after those 3 passes through the gill box, it goes over onto the comb, as I say, like Clint, that is just here. And what the comb does is taking out all the short fibres and any vegetable matter or anything like that. So the fibre that goes into the comb is fairly nicely aligned because it's been through the gill box a few times, but it's still got those short fibres and vegetable matter left in it, and the comb takes them out. So this is what comes out of the comb as kind of the byproduct of combing. You can probably see all the little wisps that are the shortest fibres. There's some little bits of straw and grass and things in there. So what is then left after combing is nicely aligned fibres because of the gill box, and only the very longest, smoothest fibres. So that is how you get a worsted spun yarn, which is nice and long and lustrous and smooth. When it comes to a yarn, they're more drapey. So there's that kind of fundamental difference. What that also means is that there'll be another 3 passes or so through the gill box after combing. Some mills will then have various setups of kind of roving frames and things like that, which will act pretty much entirely to take the weight of the sliver, so this is what's coming off the gill box, to be thinner and thinner and thinner, ready for spinning. That's very important for particularly fine yarns, things used in suiting and things like that. So that's kind of the big difference between semi-worsted and worsted. Just quickly, woolen spun yarns don't go through any gilling, any combing, anything like that. So they come off the carder as a much, much finer roving, generally they're called, roving, sliver, sliver, various terms for it, and straight onto spinning. So there is no aligning. So you've got those jumbled, lofty fibres that turn into a jumbled, lofty yarn, whereas in a worsted especially, but also semi-worsted, you get the smooth, kind of soft, lustrous yarns at the end of it. So hopefully that gives like a really brief summary of the differences. We did put a post up a little while ago giving kind of worsted versus woolen 101. So I'll share that to stories so that you can see that afterwards. And I think we might have put a blog post up as well. So I'll share all of those things as well. So that's all the questions that came in ahead of time. I don't think I've missed any that are coming in. I'm just having a quick scroll. Nope, I haven't missed any. So yeah, that's it for this week. If you're watching this after the fact and you do think of any questions, either send us a DM or drop it in the comments, and we will get to them on the next Transparency Tuesday. But in the meantime, generally speaking, anything that you want to see or know kind of helps us decide what to show you and what you want to see. So yeah, thank you very much for joining, and I'm off to do a little bit more gilling before heading home.